What's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. We got a great guest today. It's my longtime friend, Jeff Howe from The Athletic. You know him from the Boston Herald. You might know him from Lowell. You might know him from UMass. He is, what's that word? Well, he's everywhere. It's another word for it.
Omnipresent.
Thank you. And that's why you should ride shotgun, or we should ride co more often. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Now, as you folks know who have followed Jeff on social media or read him in The Athletic, he's gone through some health difficulties the last couple of years, and he's been very open about it, which I think, and he spoke about saying, you know, I'm going to share this because it might be helpful. And I think that it has been, because nobody escapes this planet without being impacted by some of the things Jeff has dealt with. So I'm going to give it over to our great friend and let you kind of give an update on where things are and how you're doing between the years.
Yeah, that's the biggest battle at this point. But for anybody who doesn't know or didn't know, I had thyroid cancer very recently, and it's something that we've monitored since 2018. And I realized going back to that point, really, when I started to open up about it, it helped me to get it off my chest. I mean, I kind of kept it inside for, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks, but you know, I'd go on road trips with you guys and I'd be like, yeah, I got to get this off my chest. Like, I'm going through some stuff here. And then I was a little more open about it on social media because, you know, things took a little bit of a hairy turn and it looked like it was going to be cancer back then. And thankfully at that point it wasn't. But when I initially tweeted about it, and I think I put some stuff on Facebook, I had people reaching out and was like, hey, how did you know how to check into this stuff? And I'm like, well, I had golf balls sticking out of my neck. It was pretty obvious. But I realized at that point, hey, you know what? Like, there are people who kind of need some help or some guidance or whatever. Even some people were like, hey, you know what? Thanks for doing that. I just scheduled a physical that I hadn't had in a few years. So I wrote more of a lengthy article on The Athletic about it, just to give people basically every detail that I could. And then, you know, again, thankfully we got the good news back in 2018 that everything was clean, but we stayed on top of it. And back in December, 3 days before Christmas, we realized, you know, the thing that we were monitoring inside the thyroid is called a nodule. And I had several of them. And the most troubling one grew pretty significant amount in a short amount of time after basically 2 years of clean checkups. So at that point, it was like, all right, my doctor, who's been amazing throughout the whole process, said, why are we monitoring this? It's to either catch it early or to really get out in front of it. At this point, it's growing, you know, it's showing signs that if it's not cancer now, it's likely heading in that direction. Let's get your thyroid removed. Thought it was a great plan. Got it removed March 11th. The thing about surgery, I keep kind of joking about this. It hurts. Surgery hurts a little bit. They don't tell you about that in the doctors in the room there. They tell you about all the pain meds, and then you kind of put two and two together, and it's like, well, those are necessary. And
it's not like this area is one that wouldn't have some nerves in it either.
Oh yeah, and that was the big risk. You know, as we were deciding between surgery or not surgery, because you know you could get a biopsy, and I'd had several biopsies in the past, kind of the initial go around when it was looking a little hairy. But it was like, we could get the biopsy. Some of them that I had gotten the first time around were called atypical, which meant they couldn't get a great read on the cells. That kind of delays the process. You got to send them down to another lab. They're like, we could biopsy it again, but there's no guarantee it's not going to look murky or, you know, undecisive. So we could get the surgery. One of the potential side effects of the surgery is some nerve damage. And there's two nerves that run up alongside the thyroid, and if they nick one of those, you could have voice problems for the rest of your life. You could have airway problems for the rest of your life. That's not great to hear. No. But this was funny. I was meeting with my surgeon for the first time, and I'm like, all right, what are we talking about here? And she's like, well, in my hands, less than 0.5%. And I'm like, all right, you're talking. I like it. She's got some moxie to her.
Like that swagger.
I'm on board. But she kind of she assured me that these things weren't really going to be an issue. Just the way that like my ultrasounds and the readings looked, like that was going to be minimal risk. Thankfully, she didn't damage anything there. We're good there. So we get the thyroid out March 11th. I knew that the first pathology results were going to be March 21st, and we weren't going to know whether it was cancer or not until then. And it looked pretty good after surgery that it wasn't anticipated that it was, but you know what? It was thyroid cancer. And it wasn't even in the big nodule that they were monitoring most closely. It was in one of the smaller ones on the other side of the thyroid. So, but we got it early. And, the surgeon was very optimistic that I'd never see her again, which she's a nice person. I'd have no problem crossing paths with her again. Hopefully professionally, we never cross paths again, but
tailgate.
Yeah, exactly. The thyroid's out. I met with my normal doctor, I don't know, April 4th, I think it was. And he did an ultrasound on the lymph nodes. Clean, everything looks good. When you have thyroid cancer, the concern is that it's going to spread to the lymph nodes. It's not going to just migrate to your big toe or anything like that. So it's got a clear path. So he was very encouraged by that. I'm going to have some blood work done in the near future here to just kind of make sure the cells look okay, that they hadn't traveled outside of the thyroid, which can produce some, other complications or help it spread. But I mean, at this point, the surgeon, my primary doctor, my endocrinologist, I should say, are very, very, very optimistic that we got this whole thing and it'll never come back. And it's, but the thing that I keep coming back to, one of the main things from the first go around, why I wanted to share my story is, first of all, lean on your support system. Second of all, stay on top of your health, because who knows how quick, like if I didn't go to the routine checkups, like my doctor wasn't dragging me into the office saying you have to be here. He left it up to me. And I said, no, I want to be on top of this thing as much as possible. And we caught it early. And like you said off the jump, nobody really escapes something like this happening. It's just how many of us can be fortunate enough to catch it early when it does. And I was. And then in terms of leaning on your support system, it's a mental battle. And I've dealt with some stuff over the last few weeks. We can get more into that if you want to. I'm an open book, but
Sure.
like the other, go ahead.
I would like to, and because, I know your dad, and I'm guessing you're I don't even know, but I'm guessing 42, 43.
39.
Well, you've been doing it for so long. You were a phenom. You arrived on the scene early. So that's therein lies the rub. That's good. So you were like, what, 28, 27 when you started on the beat?
09, so I was 26, but I'd been around,
like I said, phenom.
3 years.
Yeah. Phenom. But that has to be, as a dad and a husband, one of the most extreme stressors. Nobody wants to stare at their own mortality and elaborate on where things might head for them, but it's the wife and the children and the parents that you still have, I think.
Yep.
Go ahead on that, because that has to be a huge amount of it.
Yeah. One of the worst weeks.
And for the family too, not to exclude what they're going through.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully, my wife's a rock star. She's kept us all together throughout this whole thing. But Halloween 2018, first go around with all this, my doctor calls me, my endocrinologist calls me. I was in the Patriots locker room and they had one of those, 4:15 to 5 o'clock accesses or whatever it was. And I was getting ready. I was going to go back, take the girls out for trick or treating. They were, I think, 3 and 1 at the time. And my doctor's like, hey, you need to come back. We need to do a blood test. One of the cells looked a little funky. It looked like maybe medullary thyroid cancer, maybe not. We can't tell. And at that point, that means very little to me. But I'm like, hey, I'm at work. I'm going to take my girls out trick or treating. Can I come back later in the week? And he's like, no, like this is serious. Like we need to know for sure. And thankfully, big time, thankfully, it was not medullary thyroid cancer. But, I went back and I had to check that out. And then I remember just being a shell of myself. Actually, I remember I went, whatever story I was working on, I was in a scrum with Trey Flowers. And then I think I talked to him for a couple minutes. And then I just sort of like zoned out, completely numb. And I was talking to Duron Harmon. And I was just standing in the middle of the locker room like, what the hell is going on here? And I remember Curran, Griggy, and Mark Daniels came over. And they were like, what's wrong? Like they could tell something wrong. And I told them how my doctor just called me and they're like, you don't need to be here. Like, go. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So I went back and, took the girls out trick-or-treating that night, but it was tough. And thankfully the results were good there. But, closer to the present, one of the foundations that you guys, I can't thank you enough for helping organize and execute the $1,000 donation to One Mission. So the mental battle that I've kind of encountered, and I'm mostly on the right side of it at this point. But I was, we worked with One Mission a couple of years ago. We raised a ton of money for kids and families who are fighting cancer, and I really fell in love with the organization back in 2020. But we've kind of circled back this past month, and I was telling them, look, I'm struggling with something. It's this feeling of guilt that, I beat this thing so fast, and why was it easier for me than other people? And it's weird. It's still weird to even say that, because I would, if I'm on the other side of the camera right now, just listening to myself, I wouldn't understand that. That wouldn't make sense to me. Like, you should be happy you beat cancer technically before you knew you had it. But it's, you know people who dealt with it. Maybe you don't, strangers, stories, whatever. You hear people who just didn't. And, or, maybe they did, but they had to go through chemo or something that was a 6-month battle or a 2-year battle, or it came back and whatever. And One Mission, put me in contact with somebody who, we talked for 45 minutes, and that was incredibly helpful. And then I have a friend who is an oncologist who said, yeah, you know what, you beat it quickly, but that's a major surgery, and don't take away from that aspect of it. Like, there are some people who
withstood something. You conquered something significant in what you went through. You didn't skate.
Right. Yeah. I still
didn't skate.
I still got an axe wound in the neck.
Yeah. And you're sitting there thinking you skated, and you didn't. You went through something incredibly arduous. But it's as if, in our culture and society, we understand the toll that's exacted by cancer. And if we don't pay that, my dad had esophageal cancer. He died basically at the age I am right now. So it's something that, sticks in your head. We're not long livers, us Currans. So but again, it's about you and what you're going through. Are you advised to try and put it in a box and put it on a shelf in your mind? Because I can only imagine that it's always one of the 5 thoughts that is contained in your brain at any given time. Or do they try and get you to say, forget about it?
No, it's sort of just to welcome the emotions as they come. And, you should be happy that you beat it. I know just through all the checkups, like, going into these checkups, there's always a little bit of anxiety. That's unavoidable. And, if you get some bad news, I usually would give myself a day. When I found out that I actually had cancer, it took longer than a day. When I found out I needed surgery, I needed a day or two to kind of process it all. There are times, it's still swollen here.
Yeah.
It looks like $1 million compared to just 2 or 3 weeks ago. But, I'll just be sitting there, I'll look up at the TV and I'll feel it, or I'll swallow and I'll feel it. And I'm like, man, I kind of almost forgot that I went through all that. But then that's a little bit of a reminder. Or, we were down at the owners' meetings in Florida, and there are times when I was like, yeah, I had cancer. And it's like that at that point, it was still so fresh. We were maybe a week away from the diagnosis. And I was like, I can't believe, I can't wrap my head around the fact that I actually have to say that, which is weird.
Can I tell folks? So here's what's great about Jeff is he kind of looks like a stoic guy who's kind of reserved when you first approach him. But whatever you say to him, whatever is going through his mind comes out his mouth. And we're at the Breakers. We're not staying there. Hell no. But we're at the Breakers, which is one of the most opulent hotels in the friggin' world. And Jeff's up against the wall. I'm like, hey, buddy, how you doing? I don't know. Jeez. And it's the whole thing. I mean, just had it. Now we're here. I'm still processing. And that's great because it involves somebody in a more human interaction than good, doing good. Just waiting to see Casario just went in there. I'm going to wait to see if he comes out. We're doing something. We're not just doing we're living a life. So your transparency and your ability to share, I think, is helpful to people. And we appreciate it because we love you.
Yeah.
You know, you're a very, very well appreciated, very well respected person for a variety of reasons. The way you do the job, the way you are as a person, the intensity you bring. I love competing with you because you like competing.
Yeah.
And it's, mutual respect. And then sometimes we'll get the not even tiniest bit sideways. We talk it out. We come up with, okay, well, it's funny how it is on a beat when you're competing with someone else because you're always reading other people's stuff and interpreting or trying to suss out where they got something or whether they're all wet or whether they just did something that you should have done. And I have high respect for so many people on the beat, and Jeff is way up near the top. I can't put anybody ahead of Reese. I can't.
I get it. You've also known him longer. So, of
course.
We'll just chalk it up to that.
He's family.
That's right.
Anything else you'd like to add before we segue into a little Patriots talk?
Yeah. And again, I appreciate you giving me the chance to open up about this. I will circle back to one mission again, because I grew to love them in 2020, continuing to work with them now. And I saw firsthand just how much they are willing to go out and help somebody who is going through something. So I am going to kind of tease some stuff on Twitter. Still trying to finalize some of this stuff, but going to have a couple events. I'm pretty sure I'm going to do the buzz off down at Gillette Stadium. Got something else later in the summer that I'm hoping to raise a ton of money for. But they're an organization that's meant a lot to me before I had to deal with all this stuff myself. And, they mean more now. So hopefully, if you guys are happy to follow me or my journey or whatever, we can raise some more money for them in the very near future. So please keep your eye out for anything we've got there.
Has this impaired your ability to do karaoke? Because I'd love a karaoke event with you at the mic.
I would like, he's a good raspy singer. Like my first week out of surgery.
Hey, Joe Cocker. You can go Joe Cocker.
Yeah, I could have gone all Cocker on you that first week.
It's PG-13. Okay. Well, listen, buddy, we'll keep everybody posted on that too. And I want you to keep us posted so I can share that here on the pod. Ready to talk a little football?
Yeah.
And again, thank you for your. All right. First thing I wanted to hit on was Patriots Hall of Fame and the nominees, because you're from here and you have the same kind of stake as every single fan who ends up voting on this. We met last week for a nomination process in which we said the names of individuals who we thought should be under consideration. There were all kinds of different individuals mentioned. For instance, there was a one-time Pro Bowl kicker from the 70s and 80s, John Smith, who was a nice player, but it was nice to have him nominated. He's got a snowball's chance, but we talked about him and his name will be recalled. Julius Adams, awesome player, all-decade member in 2 different decades. At some point, we're going to have to make sure that he gets in via senior committee, but he's not going to be able to beat out some of these guys from the more recent vintages. And obviously, the Patriots Hall of Fame is not the same as Canton, but what in your mind is a Patriots media member / devotee would you weigh more significantly for a team Hall of Fame than Canton?
Man, I guess because this organization is unique. So I think you look at just, it's hard. Like Wes Welker is, in my opinion, Patriots Hall of Famer. He's not a Pro Football Hall of Famer. And I actually came to that conclusion about a year ago. I think a year ago might have been the first time he was up for Canton, and I stacked his numbers. I mean, just by volume of catches,
it's insane.
Tremendous. And you know what? You could argue that I'm not equipped to make or break the argument. You could make the argument, somebody could, that he's the greatest slot receiver of all time, I guess, because of the way he did it early in the offensive explosion of these spread offenses and what he did to change that position. But you look at the touchdowns and the yardage in comparison to the other receivers who are up for Canton, and he ranks 15th to 18th or whatever in those categories. So I don't think he's necessarily a Canton guy, but I think he should be a Patriots Hall of Fame guy. I'm sure there are people who are going to disagree because he didn't win a Super Bowl, and they're going to hold that, whether it was a drop or a bad pass or whatever, they're going to hold 2011 against him.
Sure.
And I understand that side of it too. Then you look at Parcells, and that's an incredibly polarizing discussion because he helped legitimize and stabilize an organization that had virtually nothing or none of that up until he arrived. But then the way he left, he kind of eroded a lot of that stability, which was eventually retained. But, he put a lot of players in place who helped carry Belichick into, the early 2000s. So, I think he should be in. So
here's where I am on Parcells. When he came aboard in 1993, he drafted Bledsoe, not Victor Kayam. James Bushelworth Wine was the owner at the time, the interim owner, who secured Parcells to legitimize the franchise and help it in case they did move or did sell or whatever to St. Louis. Then they drafted Bledsoe. And then ultimately, Robert Kraft did an unbelievable job of leveraging it so that he bought the team with Parcells in tow. But 93, they go 0-11, they win 5 games. 94, they make the playoffs. And they start drafting guys like McGinnis. 95, I think that was Curtis Martin's first year, 7-9 or whatever they were, 8-8, 6-10 actually, 6-10 in 95. But again, they're still building. 96, Terry Glenn, William Malloy back in 94, 95? Be that as it may. So he did construct all of that. And he did get the Patriots to a point that they didn't anticipate to be. And those foundational pieces, his players and Bill Belichick's relationship with the Krafts, wouldn't have existed had Parcells not been here.
Right.
But when you look at what happened from, call it January 1st, 1997, when they're going through the playoffs and Parcells is extracting himself from the team and then actively working to get away from the team into 1997, then to go to a rival, then to actively work from 1997 through 2000 to make things as difficult, uncomfortable, etc., for the Patriots, that has to work, in my estimation, against him.
Yeah.
He was, as he said, Darth Vader. He was public enemy number one. He did everything he could to undermine this franchise. The fact that hatchets have been buried, et cetera, is nice, but the shit that he did for 4 or 5 years, actively undermining everything that the ownership and the coaching staff tried to do, and trying to block the guy, Bill Belichick, from coming back here, and Belichick had to be a prick to extract himself from the Jets, that enters into the conversation.
Absolutely.
So I can go either way. I mean, I'm not going to pick it if he's in, and I'm not going to shed one tear if he's not.
Mm-hmm.
You.
Yeah. I'm not in the camp that's like, if he's not in, it's a joke. Like, I don't think
and there's some of that, which is so short-sighted.
Yeah, right. I'm 65-35 that he should be in, but we're totally on the same line there. Like, the fact that he's not in, I don't lose sleep over that. I think I would make the argument that he should be, but I don't think this is a right or wrong argument. Like, you stated every reason why he doesn't necessarily have to belong, or shouldn't belong, if you want to go that far into it. So that's a tougher one. You want to find somebody who I think should be a slam dunk. Logan Mankins, another guy who, the guy who got like really the worst deal of the Patriots dynasty. The first pick after they won 3 out of 4, and then gets traded in training camp before they win 3 out of the next 5. Spanned that entire title drought and was like what Belichick said, the greatest offensive lineman he ever coached.
It's really hard because you have Welker and Mankins, who were annually recognized for a period of time as the best in the in the business at their position. And I do like to make a differentiation on Welker, especially. He didn't play wide receiver, he played slot.
Mhm.
And I think that that's important when we look at numbers. It's just not the same position.
Yeah.
If you need somebody on 3rd and 3, you're not going to DeAndre Hopkins.
Right.
You know, or Larry, well, he could go to Larry Fitzgerald. He played slot. But that's what I mean. That's such an indispensable spot. Be that as it may. I think that Welker made 6 Pro Bowls, and the only one he didn't make was 07 while he was with the Patriots. And in that year, he had 123 catches. So he would have been a Pro Bowler every year. Mankins, I think, was a 7 or 8-time Pro Bowler, first or second team All-Pro 5 times. All-Pro is way more important than Pro Bowl because it signifies you were the top 4 in the league at your position. But then neither won a Super Bowl. But then you have Mike Vrabel, who was a foundational piece. And to me, this is what I was kind of driving at, where what you weigh things that are different for a team Hall of Fame. If you're talking Canton, Vrabel, screwed. If you're talking Patriots Hall of Fame, the foundational piece, the versatility, there's a byproduct of being a Patriot that they value, offense, defense, special teams, play on the edge, play in the middle of the defense, do all of it. He embodies that. And that's why I have Vrabel, when I did my voting, I had Vince Wilfork 1, kind of a layup. I think he should be a Hall of Famer as well.
Mhm.
Mike Vrabel 2, and Wes Welker 3, with the painful omission of Logan Mankins and the less painful but noted omission of Bill Parcells.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, Wilfork, was it the Baltimore game that was like the greatest game a defensive tackle has ever played? I mean, he did so many things, and similar to, not too sort of similar to Seymour in the sense that like he didn't get the recognition he deserved statistically. Vrabel, I slam dunk, Patriots Hall of Famer, not going to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Probably say the same for Dante Hightower, Devin McCourty. Like, no doubt about it, Patriots Hall of Famers probably not going to get the recognition they may or may not. I don't know. I haven't looked enough into it to say they deserve it.
No, it's okay. But you're exactly right. We got so many guys. So Wilfork will 95%, I would say, be the nominee this year. So we're looking at Welker, Vrabel, Mankins, Parcells, Slater, McCourty, Hightower, Edelman, Gronkowski, Brady, Belichick, Ernie Adams, and Dante Scarnecchia need to go in over here. And I would make a case for Ivan Fears too, very underrated. And I look at it all, and I've mentioned this to Stacey James, Vice President of Media Relations, who has shepherded this thing from womb to where it is now, the Patriots Hall of Fame. And there's got to be some kind of way to deal with this unprecedented, unimagined level of success where somehow these guys' names end up on a Ring of Honor around the friggin' stadium the way they do in Buffalo with Albert DeBunion and friggin' Joe DeLamielleure and everybody else is up there. Leave the Hall of Fame to be these guys, have their day, but you do the Ring of Honor thing, you can do the type as little as you want. But Lawyer Malloy should be honored, And Stacey's like, no, Tom, no, not today. I brought it up last week. He goes, not doing that today.
Right.
So,
I remember I wrote while the name's on the top of my mind here, Stanley Morgan should be a Pro Football Hall of Famer. We don't have to hijack the pod here, but what I was thinking of was, the 2000, the second Rams Super Bowl, the Patriots 6th. I wrote something, I think like the day before, the day of the game, that was like the line of Patriots who probably almost certainly deserve to be in the Patriots Hall of Fame. And I stretched out that line to like 2042. And like these, so you think about the ramifications of that.
Really?
It's wild. And then you talk about the guys from past generations who are going to fall completely out of favor or fall out of sight, out of mind for the online voters. Or, whoever comes about and 2030, what if Kyle Duggar enters the mix?
Exactly. That's the name I was thinking of. Damian Harris turns into a 1,700 yard a year rusher.
Right. So
Kobe Myers just continues as a machine.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a wild predicament to have. But, there's the side of you don't want to tarnish what it means by start opening the floodgates and letting like 5 guys in just to, usher in, what happens, whatever. Like there's just, it's a weird spot, but like we're going to be talking about these guys, or I've never been on the panel. You're going to be talking about these guys for decades.
I think the door will swing open at some point for you, and we will appreciate your input. And I think that, again, it's an honor, but I don't think it's necessarily this exclusive group. It's just had to stop somewhere, and Curran does it for the Herald. But yeah, be that as it may, it doesn't have to have the same pomp and circumstance that the Hall of Fame does to note the Curtis Martins or the posthumously Terry Glenn's. I don't know. Terry Glenn might be a tough one to get in, but I mean, that's the place where a player who had kind of a star-crossed existence here in New England can be recalled for his excellence and the things that he did bring. Mm-hmm. Again, Terry Glenn, maybe not the best example. Rest in peace. Love the guy. I don't want to speak ill of the guy who just passed, but certainly I think we can all agree his Patriots tenure was star-crossed. All right, you want to get off the Hall of Fame and talk a little bit about this current team?
Okay.
All right, let's bring it into the future, really the future with the NFL draft. It's on the horizon. We're not going to get into all the prospects. We got plenty of places and outlets to do that. Let's stay Patriot-centric. And Jeff, I want you to evaluate the biggest need for the Patriots as they near the draft, taking into consideration contracts, age, and where the team was at the end of its season. Let you do that, and then I got to take on this too, my guy, because I think we're forgetting just how desperately bad they were on one side of the ball. Go ahead.
Well, let's not forget that. So that's the hard part here is there are 2 ways to look at this. You look at internally, what's the biggest need? I would make a very strong case that it's tackle, because Isaiah Wynn has been streaky at best and hurt a lot, and Trent Brown, there's not a long-term commitment there. You have the potential to lose both tackles again due to injuries in the middle of the season. That's not something you want Mac Jones dealing with. I mean, I understand, give him a number 1. That makes all the sense in the world. But like, at what cost? At the cost of protecting him? Because history shows if you want a franchise caliber left tackle, whatever, either side, you got to go round 1. You might get one in round 2. Sebastian Vollmer was great, a round 2 guy. But you start going in rounds 3 through 7, you do not find long-term starting tackles in those rounds. I mean, you can go to the internet, you can find 1 or 2, but you're hitting it like 4%.
You can look at the Patriots' history at the left tackle position. Bruce Armstrong to Matt Light. Grant Williams was stuck in there, I think, at left tackle in 01. Be that as it may, as well, he was in the mix. But Light was there too. But it went Bruce Armstrong, Matt Light to Nate Solder, to now to Isaiah Wynn. Mm-hmm. First round picks, all of them. So your point is exactly dead on. And Wynn should be a better player than he is.
Yeah. He's shown the ability.
He's not miscast out there. And the lapses he had last year with, I think, 4 false starts, 9 overall penalties, sacks allowed. This is not a guy who, when you stand there and speak to him at length, you say, I can see why it's not working. Sometimes you get that. Isaiah Wynn, absolutely not. Earnest, smart, wants to do well. Dante Scarnecchia swears by the guy, and that's good enough for both of us. Yeah. So I don't get the disconnect between performance and who he seems to be, which the Patriots probably don't either, which is why they're going to pay him $10 million this year. They expect him to be better, as do I, Jeff. Sorry.
No, I remember in 2020, he was at his best he played 10 games in 2020, if memory serves. He was at his best during the 5 games when he was not on the injury report. He was undoubtedly at his worst in the 5 games when he was on the injury report and played through it. I wonder, I didn't follow them as closely in 21, because my role changed. But, was there an injury report disparity? I don't recall. I don't want, whatever. I don't have to think through it.
He missed one game. I mean, he missed a game and didn't start two.
But did they maybe downplay some injuries? Were there some nagging things that held him back during some of his poorer performances? I don't know. But I'll move it to the other side too, because you said, or actually real quick on the, I was talking to Kraft a couple weeks ago and he noted a couple times how Mac Jones showed his toughness because he kept taking a beating and getting right back up, which was something that people did not pay enough attention to when he was at Alabama, because that stuff absolutely happened. He
took a thrashing there too.
Absolutely. Yeah. He had an all-world offensive line, but that dude took some hits in college and he showed his ability to play through them. But you don't want that to happen. You don't want like a David Carr situation. You don't want these guys, especially at that age, to keep getting hit, especially with, the turnover in the offensive coaching staff, yada, yada, yada. We can all get to that if you want to. But, you also mentioned how the season ended. And the season ended with them getting trounced by the Bills twice. And would they go like 20 consecutive possessions without punting? I mean, they need to catch up to what Buffalo is doing offensively. And, everybody mentioned speed, but which is totally, I don't want to discount that. It's absolutely accurate. But I think they need to build this thing with more of a long-term focus in mind. You need to do it through the draft. The Bills have been installing this system on both sides of the ball during McDermott's entire tenure, and Bean has done a really great job too, over the course of years. And that's why I think you saw, as the season went on last year, the Patriots were built almost overnight because of some of the draft misses in years past and the need to facilitate some of those misses or to counter some of those misses through free agency. Whereas the Bills were built organically, and that's why I think you saw more waves of talent than maybe some of the frontline guys the Patriots had. And so that's why I think, if it's a left tackle, great. If it's a linebacker or a pass rusher or even a top flight cornerback, that could help as well, because they need to really hit on these pieces.
There's three things at play too with the Patriots. When you look at the Patriots and the Bills and you say, okay, well, the Bills since 2016 have kind of built a wagon, and the Patriots have kind of flailed about in building their team for the 2020s. Three reasons. One, Patriots were a championship ready team, which at times allocated resources to try and ensure immediate benefits. Mohamed Sanu for a second, Sony Michel and Isaiah Wynn, although I would say they needed those positions anyway. So people say, well, they did it just for Brady. No, they needed it for a football team, not just for Tom Brady. And also drafting late. So those are three reasons that the Buffalo Bills didn't have to deal with. But still, that doesn't explain away Juwan Williams, and it doesn't explain away N'Keal Harry. And, you have those extremely valuable opportunities. And this is something that Robert Kraft makes absolutely no bones about pointing out. And don't let that kind of just fly by as a note. That is a flashing billboard sign. I can't buy teams that we should have drafted. Said it last year. He reiterated it this year. The drafting, the fact that the Patriots have to staff cornerback, not because Stephon Gilmore priced himself out or J.C. Jackson did, but because you missed on a guy like Juwan Williams.
Yeah.
That you had to buy two tight ends because the guys you drafted in the third round in Asiasi and Keene aren't going to work out. So you had to buy them. That you had to spend an inordinate amount of money at wide receiver to just get to okay.
Yeah.
To just get to B-. You had to spend a shit ton. So it all keeps coming back to the draft. Kyle Duggar was a good pick. Last year, we see the three picks who are paying dividends. Damian Harris, obviously a good pick too, but they got to keep hitting, Jeff, huh?
Yeah, and I still think extremely highly of Josh Uche. And, you put him on the field more regularly, he could be.
Why was he was incredible in the friggin' minicamp last year. It was laughable. How I'm like, will you just settle down? It's minicamp.
Right. There were times when we were like, is he practicing too hard? Like, is that why he's so good? But he's dynamite. I mean, that guy's speed and explosiveness, he could be an absolute transcendent type of player. I know he had his rookie year, the ankle kind of slowed him. I don't recall. Did he have an injury situation last year?
Yeah,
too?
he did. He did. He played a little bit, then the injury. Like he had some productive games against some shit teams, but early on. But his first 5 games were pretty good. I could Google it in 2 seconds. But yeah, he had a bit of an issue that waylaid him. Same thing with Chase Winovich too, though. I mean, again, guys who seem to have value, seem to be athletic, and then for whatever reason, there's an aversion to putting them on the field. Whether they're skinny, they can't hold the edge, whatever. But if you got a bag of skills and you were drafted and you're only a situational guy, is the failure in the forecasting that was done in the player evaluation, is the failure in the development, or is the failure in the player just doesn't give a shit? I mean, who knows? But there's too many of these instances. Maybe they cover all 3.
Yeah, I mean, like N'Keal Harry, that was a misevaluation.
100%.
Chase Winovich, he was, when I calculated my pass rush metrics, he was their best pass rusher in 2020. And it wasn't a fluke. Like his numbers matched or rivaled Kyle Van Noy in 2019. And yeah, there were some undisciplined issues and certainly he fell out of favor. But it was like, I tweeted something right after the trade to the Browns. I was like, I can't figure out like what happened. And a whole bunch of people like sort of took it the wrong way. They were like, well, yeah, he didn't have gap discipline, didn't maintain the edge, didn't do this, didn't do that. I'm like, I know, but why?
Right.
Why did he go from being so damn good to being unable to do all that stuff to the point where he was just a special teamer for a handful of games?
And the answer, I guess, you say, okay, well, he couldn't do those. And people point that out. And maybe Gerard Mayo and Steve Belichick are saying to him, look, you have to do it this way. And he's not successful at it, so he wants to revert to the other way.
Yeah.
That to me is a misevaluation as well. He just can't do it the other way. He wants to be an elusive, Dwight Freeney-esque. Again, he's not friggin' Dwight Freeney, but an elusive pass rusher as opposed to a power pass rusher. And if you've drafted an elusive pass rusher, figure it out. Matt Judon is an elusive pass rusher. He can use power, but he's an elusive pass rusher. Well, by the end of the year, teams were exploiting that. So you have to figure out a way to mitigate that. As Chris Long said, I loved it. Never heard it. He really gets to run the hoop, meaning Judon got to run upfield and circle around the way Cassius Marsh used to try to.
Yeah.
But look, we like to put a cork in this when we get to about 40 minutes.
Okay.
I think we'll close it in. What else you got? Wide receiver, you give a shit about? I mean, like, I will. Everybody wants to see a wideout.
There is so much value in pairing, and we've seen it, the college connections with Burrow and Chase and Tua and Waddle. They're putting Mac Jones with Jameson Williams or John Metchie. There'd be a lot of value to that. And I spoke with the Alabama surgeon who repaired both of their knees and was incredibly optimistic that they'll be ready when necessary, whenever the NFL teams deem them ready. So I wouldn't be worried about the injury front. But again, like this comes down to at what cost, and is giving Mac Jones that 4 to 5 year answer at wide receiver worth the offset, worth missing at a potential left tackle, or is it worth the cost of not stockpiling the talent on defense that you need to eventually catch Buffalo? Because if you can't catch Buffalo, we know how much more difficult that is going to be for the Patriots to get after the team that is very clearly better than them right now. And it's the first time we've been able to say that for a long time. So, and the problem there is, I think it's a fascinating one because these are areas where you have to hit in the first round. Mm-hmm. And like, again, left tackle, got to hit in the first round. Wide receiver over the last 3 to 4 years has been deeper. You can get a really, really good one in the third round if you evaluate it right. Yep. I know we know that's been tricky. We don't need to run the same podcast that has probably been out there a million times over on that position. But then, like get linebacker. Like if you want a prototypical NFL linebacker, more often than not, that's a first round guy. The pass rushers, more often than not, first round guys. Top tier cornerbacks, more often than not, first round guys. So they have all these holes that they need to fill, and they need to do it organically. And it's going to take some patience. But they need to do more of what they did last year. And I still think the year before, it started to swing in a better direction, especially if Uche pans out. They need to start. It can't just be about the first round. They need to hit on their first 3 rounds, and they need to be damn near 100%. You know, it can't go less than like 80% with their top 3 picks in the next 2 to 3 drafts if they want to be able to catch Buffalo for the long term.
And if they do not hit that 80%, well, it'll be fascinating to watch how things flesh out down there in Foxborough. Jeff Howe, thank you for your openness and sharing as much as you did at the top of the pod. And always thanks for your intel as we went along. Talk Patriots, talk NFL. Find our guy at The Athletic. Jeff, what's the Twitter handle? As everybody already knows by now.
At Jeff P. Howe, because some other Jeff Howe just stole the at Jeff Howe. So I had to throw the middle initial in there.
Appreciate you. Great stuff. Thanks, man.
Thanks, man.